I think it's gonna be awesome, and then Borthwick will connect. Oh yeah.
Who, me?
Yeah.
She is.
It's gonna be great.
Welcome, everybody, to our City Council work session on the capital improvement plan. We almost have the full quorum of the council here, getting closer, but I'm going to pass it over to the city manager to go through this presentation, and look forward to hearing from all of you and the questions that we have directed at you. Look forward to all those answers. So appreciate everyone coming out. City manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question to the clerk. Do we need to call roll?
Oh, roll call.
We do not.
Oh, we don't.
Not for work.
Just want to make sure.
All right.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, members of the staff who are here. Thank you for the members of the staff and counselors that are on Zoom, and thank you to the members of the public who are tuning in. We have a presentation for you tonight. We'll walk you through what we have to date for the capital improvement plan for the fiscal years 23 through 28. We have, as a result of sharing this presentation with the planning board, placed this presentation on the website as a resource and as a reference to you. So we'll just reiterate that, and we'll make sure it's as accessible as possible for everybody who would like to see it. So the CIP is essentially a living and evolving planning document. It's a tool in the overall budget toolkit. When we talk about CIP, the CIP process includes its approval, but does not necessarily appropriate any money until we get to the time of adopting the budget. So we're in planning mode, if you will, up to and through adoption of the CIP in March, and money comes later, and we'll show you that as we get through the slides and explain the process in more detail. Thanks, Abby. Next slide. So there's a lot of information here. What you need to know is that the process is a multi-month process. The planning board kicks this off in September, and department heads and citizens alike submit their project requests. The planning board develops an advisory committee made of planning board members that sit with staff in early December and prepare the recommendation to the planning board public hearing and adoption, which this past year took place on December 16th. And then we're here tonight to have the work session, plan for a public hearing at the February 7th council meeting, and with the hope to adopt the CIP in March so that it then becomes placed into the budget document in late April when you get the full budget. But keep in mind, at that time, we're still not appropriating money. And when we do appropriate money as part of adopting the budget in June, it's only for that first year of the CIP. So just keep that in mind as we roll forward. This is a list, and when you read the document, the sections are organized in these categories. We've found historically that it's best to organize the work that we do and the projects that we plan for into these 6 particular sections. Equally important are the appendices in the back, and let me just spend a moment on those. This year there were 31 citizen-requested projects, and since the inception of allowing for citizens to make these requests, we've had 180. State projects is really an FYI. These would have no local funding dollars, but take place within the city. The studies list is helpful, and we want to make sure you see the same resources we get to see and to use, because they really help to inform our decision making. With number 4, Historic Document Restoration Index, we have identified over 1,300 documents to date, with an additional 1,000 that we know of that just haven't been listed because they're awaiting cost assessments. But we do have a significant number of historic documents to take care of, and then the maps, which are pretty self-explanatory. So in terms of funding the CIP, there are different buckets, if you will, and this chart is really intended to give an overview of who funds a project or how projects get funded. And the point here is to understand that this goes well beyond the use of property taxes to fund projects. So there are opportunities through the general fund revenues, along with our special revenue fund, such as parking, the enterprise funds related to water and sewer, and then there are state and federal funding when that is applicable, and we can utilize those. And then occasionally there are public-private partnership opportunities, and you'll see that in each element sheet as we walk through. So a highlight for this current process is to share that before you are 98 projects total, 14 of which are new, and then doing the math, 84 that have carried over from last year's CIP, and they may have been updated, as may be the case for new costs or considerations. Of the projects, 7 are vehicles and equipment, 36 represent buildings and infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So it's a nice mix within the different categories. But this is both the headache slide and the slide I think you're all looking to understand better. And this speaks to the policy that we use to tie in capital expenditures from the general fund. And we look to go to stay within 2% of the city's prior year general fund budget. So that number would be, when the budget was approved at $123 million, that number would be $2.46 million. And the request in front of you as part of this current CIP for capital outlay is for 1.49% or $1.84 million for FY23. The bar graph is hard to read, and yet the takeaway here is that you can see there was relatively uniform distribution, and then in the last 2 years, due to COVID primarily, those numbers were drastically reduced, and we made careful decisions on how to spend money. So the year in blue is the proposed FY23 number, and that's that 1.49% or $1.84 million. And then in funding the CIP in terms of bonds, this is what we would go out to bond for. The target that we try to aim for is no more than 10% of the city's net debt service. And again, this is a reminder, and this chart is a good place to remind folks that this is a planning tool. These numbers always change, especially in the out years. It's important for us to project, but a note that you'll see as you creep out into the out years here, you'll see the yellow, you'll see the total bar creep up to and rise above 10%, but never in any given year have we gone near or over 10%. This is just for planning of all the things we know to be on our plate and part of a debt schedule. But what I want to point out that the current year, we're at 8.13%, and the proposed percentage for the coming year's FY23 CIP is 8.91. So just a bit about each project sheet or element sheet as we refer to them. It shows basic project information, and a fun fact is on this particular slide that the number that corresponds, in this case it's building and infrastructure, the number 15 in this particular slide is really hard to read. It's in the top line, but that's the year the project was originally submitted as part of the CIP. So you'll see in this case it was originally submitted in 2015. But this chart just helps you to understand the way the project sheet is laid out. There's basic project information, there's evaluation criteria, and then the bottom box shows, for this particular funding year, the requests and where the money would propose to be coming from. And then the last sheet talks about anything else we haven't pointed out about the sheet, but the important one is that third note that says notes on major changes to the funding or project scope, and that's where staff has made sure that we call out anything that may have changed from a previous reference in a previous CIP. So I'm wrapping things up with a reminder about how the schedule goes. So there'll be public comment this evening. There'll be public comment at the public hearing on February 7th. I'm sure there will be public comment when we look to adopt this on March 7th. There'll be ample time for us to hear and receive public comment. And with that, I would suggest, if it were okay with the council, we would hold questions till the end. So just make notes, and we're going to start things off with Fire Chief Todd Germain.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. This first project is our ambulance replacement program. We set aside a third, or we request to set aside a third of the cost of an ambulance every year, and on the third year, request to purchase the ambulance. We have 3 ambulances in the city. 2 of them run first due, 1 of them in reserve, primarily in reserve. Again, this is a program that where every 3 years we replace the ambulance. The oldest ambulance that we have, we dispose of, and the newest one remains in first due. We in FY25 we start to increase the request to hedge for inflation. Next project is our CIP rolling stock replacement program for large apparatus. We run 4 pumpers in the city, and we try to replace them every 5 years. so that the oldest pumper is no more than 20 years old. We have 2 first due and 2 in reserve. The funds would include a complete setup, including the radio, lettering, and striping as well, and this is a project for FY25. Next project is durable medical equipment. This project will fund the purchase of mobility and chest compression devices for the department's ambulances. Included is a power stretcher and a power load system, and these are the hydraulic self-loading stretchers that we use in our ambulances. It also includes 3 stair chairs, which are devices we use to carry patients up and down stairways, and Lucas chest compression devices, which are devices that free up our personnel from doing CPR. It's an automatic CPR device. This equipment's vital to the continuance and providing high-quality critical medical care to the community. This would be for FY23, this current year. Next project, personal protective clothing replacement. This is a project we started back in 2018 with a goal of replacing personal protective clothing every 5 years so that all personnel have a primary and secondary set of structural firefighting gear that is no more than 10 years old as required by NFPA. We started this project in 2018, and the idea would be to request the funds each year and replace a third of the gear each year for 3 years. We started in 2018, so this year, FY23, the first sets of gear that we bought are now 5 years old and need to be replaced with a second set so that that firefighter can have 2 sets of gear, again with no set of gear being more than 10 years old. And then this project will begin again in FY28 when those final sets of gear are 5 years old. This project would provide for the replacement of our entire complement of self-contained breathing apparatus. It entails about 42 air pack devices with masks and approximately 90 air bottles. This also would include a tracking system, bone conduction microphones, and it syncs to our radios via Bluetooth. This is state-of-the-art stuff. This is we would request to set aside each year starting FY24 a third of the cost, and then an FY26 request release of the funds to purchase all of the equipment at one time to make sure that all of the devices are the same model and exactly the same for firefighter safety. And the final project is cardiac monitors. This project replaces 3 frontline cardiac monitor defibrillators. These are devices defibrillate, monitor pace, and diagnose cardiac arrhythmias, as well as monitor blood levels of oxygen, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide. These are highly specialized devices that are used many times a day by our paramedics and EMTs, in both the fire engines and the ambulances, and this is for FY24. And that completes my list of projects. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. My name is Peter Rice. I'm the Director of Public Works. This item is a piece of equipment called a brine machine. As part of our snow and ice operations, we use salt to control freezing of the roadways. The salt is an environmental concern, and is part of our municipal separate stormwater sewer system permit, or what they call the MS4 permit, which we're required to reduce the amounts of salt utilized. Brine it gives us the ability to use less salt to pre-treat the roadways, and this request would be for next year to add to our equipment to be able to purchase that.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Newport, Chief of the Police Department. Our requests are going to be based off of a proposal of a design and build of a new police station. So this first slide here is a placeholder for land acquisition in case there's a piece of land that we choose that is chosen for a location of the new police station that the city doesn't own. There's no money set aside for it, but it's the placeholder in case there's a need to purchase land. In a prior fiscal year, we allocated $50,000 for a site location study and assessment, and this involves an assessment. Our second slide is estimated projection to build a police station to be $42 million. Request in FY23 is $40,600,000. This study completed in 2014 determined the current facility doesn't meet the space or law enforcement needs of the department. Last fiscal year, the council allocated $1.4 million for preliminary designs once a prospective site is chosen. We're still working on finding a prospective site. Our next slide request is FY23 for $400,000 for continued repairs to our current station. This project addresses major repair issues with the current facility until we get a new police station. The department was allocated $400,000 in FY21 and $400,000 FY22 to address department-wide deficiencies. However, those funds have had to be used primarily to redirected to address the mold and asbestos remediation, which is still going on in our police station. In addition to that, the underlying issue why the mold continues to come back is we need to address the HVAC system, which we are currently doing, and that has absorbed some of that $400,000 as well, working in hand with DPW funds. Additional monies will also be addressed to secure our back parking lot behind the police station. In FY23, with the mold and applicable problems anticipated to be resolved, the department is requesting the additional $400,000 on this slide to start addressing delayed projects, which we originally had requested the money for 2 years ago.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilors. I'm Nathan Lunny. I'm your school business administrator. The first element from the schools is the district-wide facility improvements. The request in fiscal 23 is for $1.6 million. The detailed slide offers some support. Next year, we'd like to replace the artificial turf surface at Portsmouth High School. That field was constructed and went into use in 2011. It's used heavily by multiple teams each season, and in fiscal 23, we will have enjoyed 12 years of turf use. School Facilities Director Ken Lynchy and his team have addressed annual maintenance and repairs due to field use and weather impacts, and have continued annual safety testing. The turf will be ready for replacement next year. Estimated cost is $800,000. And additionally, we need to replace and expand the tennis courts at Portsmouth High School. The 4 tennis courts at PHS were constructed in 1989. They are used routinely by our teams for practice, but our varsity athletic competitions require 6 playing courts. For years, those contests have been played at South Mill Pond courts. It's time now to replace the old courts with 6 and shift back to the high school. Estimated cost $800,000. In this same element, in the out years of 24 and 27, the schools have enjoyed a repeating cycle of capital investment that's provided $1 million every third year. We project that would be applied to mechanical infrastructure upgrades and continued energy efficiency projects in fiscal 24, and ongoing paving, roofing, flooring, and other infrastructure improvements in fiscal 27. Our second element is the elementary school upgrades. The request for fiscal 23 is for $1.5 million. Next year, we plan to repair and replace exterior windows at Dondero and at Little Harbor Elementary Schools. In the out year of fiscal 26, we hope to complete comprehensive interior renovation and code compliance upgrades at New Franklin Elementary School. The estimated cost for that will be $5 million. And our final school element is addressing the Sherburne School Building, currently the home of the Robert J. Lister Academy program. It's in the out year of fiscal 25. We have a placeholder of $3 million. That building needs a complete comprehensive renovation, including all systems, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, air handling, as well as sprinklers, building envelope improvements, safety upgrades, and interior upgrades. The acquisition of community campus may certainly address the needs for Lister Academy if it finds a home there, but for planning purposes, this out-year element is a reminder that the facility will need to be addressed in some respect regardless. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Abby, and I'm a member of the city's finance staff, and I help oversee the next 2 projects, both of which pertain to the restoration, digitalization, and storage of permanent city documents. Both of these next 2 projects are shared between the city's finance department and the city clerk's office. The first project is a permanent records storage facility. It's currently located here in City Hall. It was completed in FY18, and it features a waterless nitrogen argon fire suppression system. It's climate controlled. It monitors our heat and humidity levels and has UV safe lights for the documents. It is for the purposes of the storage of the city's permanent documents, either those that are historic in nature or that are required by law. The room also features a quarantine area for documents that are currently infected with mold or mildew or red rot or have been damaged by pests over the years. We are not requesting any funding in FY23 for this item. The second element is the restoration, preservation, and digital scanning of the city's historic and permanent documents. By law, the city must hold and maintain specific documents indefinitely. The majority of these fall under the auspices of either the Finance Department or the City Clerk's Office. There are currently over 1,300 identified documents, with over 1,000 more waiting just for preservation assessments. To date, with CIP funding received since FY18, we have restored 128 documents. For the past 5 years, the city has also applied for and received grants from the New Hampshire State Moose License Plate Preservation Program in an attempt to help offset the capital improvement costs. These 5 grants, which to date we've received, total $46,096 and have preserved 24 documents. For FY23, we're requesting $100,000, which will be divided evenly between the City Clerk's Office and the Finance Department. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. I'm Peter Britz, the Environmental Planner and Sustainability Coordinator. I'll be representing the Planning Department. Until beginning of last week, I was the Acting Planning Director, but we've hired a new Planning Director, Beverly Mesa-Zent, who's in the audience. But I'll carry this project forward for now, and then she can take over for next year. So this is a land acquisition project. This is a strategy by the Conservation Commission to protect conservation land and open space. We're not requesting any funding this year, but starting next year, they'll be requesting $500,000 per year to protect open space throughout the city and provide for securing environmentally sensitive areas through time. Another item for next year, not this year, but to update the historic district guidelines. There'll be a $50,000 expenditure to update the materials the Historic District Commission uses in reviewing projects and expand their understanding of work in the Historic District. The next item is more of a placeholder. It's based on the strategy for a 2017 redevelopment of the Vaughan Worth Bridge area, a strategic vision that was developed then, hasn't been carried forward. It may be reinitiated, so we're keeping it here as a placeholder. This item is a $25,000 item for trail development projects. So this would be improvement to existing open space projects involving things like boardwalks or trail access for areas where people can recreate and get to trails in the city. The next item is the McIntyre Federal Office Building. It's not yet determined precisely how these funds will be used, but we kept in here as money because work will need to be done over the next year, and this will be a small amount to carry that on. The Climate Action Plan is a priority of the Sustainability Committee. They have expressed a note and urgency for action due to the climate crisis ongoing, and this was an effort to bring the community together to develop a climate action plan that will support making Portsmouth a more resilient community. This is a groundwater study item that would be looking at groundwater impacts throughout the downtown, particularly in the more historic parts of the downtown. Understanding groundwater impacts as coastal flooding and sea level rise comes in will be a very helpful tool in understanding what infrastructure needs replacement and protecting, ultimately saving money on protecting infrastructure before it gets impacted by groundwater, but also could serve as an early warning for residents that see groundwater flooding impacting their homes. This next item.
Good evening, Good evening, virtually, Mayor and City Councilors. Todd Henley, the Recreation Director. This first project is continued funding for upgrades to existing athletic fields. Improvements include drainage, irrigation, and improving turf systems. This next project is For additional outdoor recreation fields, this project is to complete an additional field and amenities at the new Campus Drive Athletic Field Complex. This phase of the project is being pushed off to FY28 due to the costs. Next up is the Greenland Road Recreation Facility. This is a phased build out of the Stump Dump Lot Master Plan. Phase 1 includes a skate park, pump track, gravel parking lot, and grass field area. Additional phases to include walking paths, playground, paved parking, lighting, and field upgrades are pushed out to FY28. This will also be the main access point to the New Hampshire Seacoast Greenway route, or the rail trail. As you know, the previous council passed a resolution in late December to appropriate $2.2 million from unassigned fund balance for Phase 1. However, Phase 1 is being shown in the CIP sheet due to the fact that it was presented as such and adopted by the planning board prior to the council vote. Next up is citywide playground improvements. This is continued funding for renovation of city playgrounds. There are approximately 20 playgrounds in the city, and Aldrich Park on Court Street is the next to be upgraded. Next up is the Leary Field bleachers and grandstands. The plan is to keep the design of the bleachers, just looking to make upgrades and bring to compliance with standards and codes. Next up is the outdoor pool aquatics upgrade and pool house. This is to address the immediate need for aquatics upgrade at the pool, including new liner, filters, and pump house. The aquatics upgrade are most important now to keep the pool operational. The city will provide in-house upgrades to the pool house this year, as we have pushed out construction of a new pool house due to the cost of that project.
This element is setting aside money for upgrades or improvements to the community campus. If we close on it coming up, the intent is to utilize these monies to address carpeting and painting and things that are in need of upgrades. The next element is a implementation of the Pierce Island Master Plan. This is an out-year item. A lot of work was done out of at the island as part of the treatment plant upgrade, and so we feel that a year break in between is appropriate. This item, similar to the playground monies, are set aside for parks and monuments. This is monies include monies to go to the Gateway Park, required by the Department of Transportation as part of a memorandum agreement, as part of a project out there, so these monies would be used to address that requirement. The city is a Tree City USA for over 20 years. These monies go towards the tree program. This is an out-year project. We have adequate funds for the next year. This item shows the Prescott Park Master Plan. We're currently in Phase 1 of the implementation of that master plan. Monies have been previously appropriated. The monies shown here in FY24 are for the next stage, the next phase. In addition to the master plan, there are a number of items that come up throughout the year, such as repairs to docks and pavilions and things like that need to be addressed. These capital monies would be used to address those non-master plan projects. The city has a fuel station out at the Department of Public Works. This fuel station services the fire department, the police department, the Department of Public Works, and adjacent communities. The fuel station is not in compliance with requirements and is in desperate need of upgrade. We have done the design, and these monies would be to go to implement an upgrade to this facility. In an effort to maintain public overlooks along the river, the city secured an easement from a development along Bow Street and built a pier there a number of years ago, or an overlook. These monies would go to improve that or repair some aspects of that overlook and improve the sidewalk accessing that, as well as add some improved signage so that it's more apparent to the general public that there's a nice overlook present there. As you may be aware, the City Hall has suffered for a number of years from HVAC, heating and ventilation challenges. We've been working with the police department to address the most critical items, and last year monies were set aside to do some continued improvements. These monies shown in an out year are identified if a much larger scale renovation is required. We're currently working with engineers to confirm the scope of that work, but this money is identified as a placeholder. The recycling transfer station out at the Department of Public Works is in need of improvements from a safety standpoint as well as an operational standpoint. These monies shown in for FY26 are intended to create a more enclosed space which will allow consolidation of operations, improved operations, and safer operations. It'll also include a swap shop, which is something that residents have been requesting. These monies would go towards funding improvements at historic cemeteries throughout the city. As you know, we recently created a permanent historic cemetery committee, which will help assist in prioritizing the expenditures of these monies. Our recommendations to be made to council and the city manager. The city has over 30 retaining walls throughout the city. These monies are set aside to address repairs that are necessary to these retaining walls, and this year we're not asking for any monies. Sound barriers have been an ongoing challenge for residents for a number of years. We have had some success this year, not complete success, in the fact that the Department of Transportation has identified what's called the Type 1 project for the Panaway Manor side of Route 95. We were hoping to get both sides of the highway addressed, but there has been movement for at least one side, and these monies are identified to assist in the implementation of that. Citywide facilities monies are identified to address upgrades necessary at all the city facilities. Historically, we've been setting aside $1 million every 3 years. Deferred maintenance is continuing to grow, and we have challenges on all of our buildings. So we've revisited our request, and there's a list on the next page which identifies not necessarily in priority, but a number of things that have been deferred and that need to be addressed. So these monies would go towards addressing the most critical aspects of these projects. This is an aspirational project. Many folks have looked at addressing undergrounding utilities in the city over time. The utility companies have made it very clear that they would not participate in that unless the city pays for the bulk of the cost. These monies are identified this year to be allocated to Fleet Street, which would allow burying one of the circuits downtown along Maplewood Avenue, down to Hanover Street, down to Fleet Street. This would take one of the two circuits that are currently shown in the figure on your slide, on your element sheet, which goes down Market Street. There are actually two circuits that run down Market Street, and this project coming up would unload one of those circuits, which would allow for future work, which is shown in FY26, to address the second circuit. It is a significant amount of money. It would be done in conjunction with the Fleet Street project, which we'll speak to in a little bit as we move forward here.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. My name is Alan Brady. I'm the IT manager for the city. As you can see on the first slide on page 98, IT requests have a total of $841,658. A breakdown of each request is on the following pages. On page 99, requests for computers and notepads replacements following a 4-year cycle. Replacement, a total of 94 computers and notebooks will be replaced between the City Hall, Police Department, and Fire Department, a total cost of $123,750. On page 100, server replacements, 2 police servers are going to be replaced for older ones, totaling $31,000. On the following page, page 101, other technology replacements for City Hall, Public Works, and the Fire Department. There are several requests, including Microsoft products, spam filters, network management system, radios, WAN switches, and the CMS data conversions, totaling $230,000. The following page, 102, continuing on with other technology requests. Police, fire, and school are requesting various upgrades to include radios, projectors, printers, and the police is continuing to appropriate for the hardware upgrades in the dispatch center, and the school department is continuing the upgrade to the Wi-Fi access system, VDI expansion, network switches, and the police department is also requesting $368,158, the fire department $28,750, and the school department $60,000. And on the summary page, 103, the total breakdown cost per department totaling, once again, $800,441,658. On the following page is the financial software upgrade. This project is to replace the city's financial software that is scheduled to be replaced in 2028 at an estimated cost of $1.75 million. We are requesting $250,000 towards these costs in the up-and-coming fiscal year. The following item is the record retention software. This project is the purchase of a record management software intended to house permanent and eventually all citywide digital records with the capacity to aid the legal retention and proper care of long-term digital files.
I'll speak on this. This is our computer-aided dispatch system. This is our operating system for the police department and also used with the fire department and our dispatch center. The full cost of the project is estimated at $1.3 million. Our current software system, which is mission-critical infrastructure in the police department, is over 20 years old. The request in FY23 is for $250,000 towards the purchase of this new system. In prior years, our CIP funding total prior to the state is already at $400,000, and of the $1.3 million project total. The bid will be awarded this fiscal year, and implementation will begin in FY22 through FY23. The out year's funding identified in the slide will address the remaining costs of this project through a payment plan with a vendor.
This item is for paving the parking lots throughout the city. It's important to note these are parking revenues, not tax dollars, that go to address this need. The next item is monies identified to address and improve the parking meters or kiosks throughout the city. Recent upgrades to technology relative to cell are phasing out the 3G and forcing us to upgrade to 4G, so these monies will complete that transition.
Thanks. This is the Hampton Branch Rail Trail, also known as the Seacoast Greenway, where completion of this project will be the on-road portion in Portsmouth of the Seacoast Greenway. New Hampshire DOT is currently in design of this project. We'll be working on improvements over the next 2 years. So we have funding scheduled for 2 years out where there'll be improvements along the rail corridor, including bike ped improvements and connections throughout the city. The next item is a implementation of the bicycle pedestrian plan. Again, this is for parking revenue to use these funds from parking revenue. They'll be used to put in place bicycle and pedestrian plan improvements as opportunities arise in the city, identified in the bicycle ped plan. This is a item for next year to keep track of Middle Street bike lanes and improvements that might need to be done to follow up on that work in the Middle Street area, likely in conjunction with the Miller and Middle Street intersection improvements to install bike boxes. This next item is a wayfinding system. We've completed the phase 1 of the wayfinding work. This is the next phase of the wayfinding work scheduled for next year, again with parking revenues, things such as access to the Seacoast Greenway, as well as bike ped scale digital, virtual, and physical signage. This next item is in an out year 26. This is for future years to expand the city's bicycle network. In this case, the Greenland Middle Road corridor. And then this next item is a Market Street side path. This is, we get a lot of traffic and bike traffic on the Market Street corridor, the new improvements in the Gateway Park. This will provide safe access along those areas. It's still scheduled for 2 years out, but will improve that gateway.
This item is working with the New Hampshire DOT to create a side path along the Route 1 corridor. Their plan at this point is from Wilson Road to Heritage. We would like to make sure we bring it all the way to Elwyn Road because it's a logical connection to the new side path that we're working on in that area. As many of you may know, the Route 1 corridor is very challenging for people to cross. These monies are identified to improve the crosswalks, and they'd be done in the signals, traffic signals to improve safety, and it's planning to be done in conjunction with the Route 1 side path construction.
This project is a Maplewood Ave Downtown Complete Streets project. Funds from development in the area will be combined to do other Complete Streets works in that area. This next item is Elwyn Park traffic calming and pedestrian improvements. As part of this project, sidewalks will be constructed on McKinley and Harding after public input and outreach is done on that work. This next item is scheduled for fiscal year '24, but it's a Borthwick Avenue bike path. It'll be a multi-use path along Borthwick Avenue, making a key connection from the future rail trail up Eileen Dondero Foley Avenue, the new street that was constructed that would connect to the rail trail, and then along Borthwick Avenue to the new Hodgson Ave and Kate Street connection up to Bartlett.
This project identifies monies to upgrade Market Square. Market Square was constructed in 1977, and minor upgrades have been done since that time. There's a lot of infrastructure that needs to be addressed in that area, and we're looking to coordinate this with the Fleet Street project. It is identified for next year. Obviously, significant public input would be solicited, and there would be a process before any changes, significant changes were made. These monies are identified to extend a section of sidewalk from Odeon Point Road up to just before the near Wentworth Road, just before the bridge. These monies are biennially identified for improvements to the city's sidewalk inventory. The next slide has a backlog of projects shown. We're currently working with the Maple Haven and Panaway Manor area. We just recently completed a public survey, and we're planning to have public meetings, I believe, in February to continue that effort to move forward to design and construction. This item identifies monies for addressing the city's traffic signals. The city owns and operates 20 traffic signals. A number of them are outdated. These monies go towards improvements towards those traffic signals. In addition to traffic signals, intersections are often in need of improvements. We're planning to move forward with a review and propose adjustments to the Greenleaf Lafayette Road intersection. This has been identified through the Parking, Traffic, and Safety Committee as a safety concern, and these monies would be used to move that project forward. Monies have been identified and through cooperation with developers set aside to start the process to look at improving the intersection at Market and Russell. What you see here is a roundabout that has been identified as a possible solution. It is an out-year project, and we believe this is the time frame that it would be executed in. The city owns and maintains 15 bridges. These monies are identified to do maintenance on those bridges. The Kate Street Bridge is in need of replacement, and these monies are identified to replace that section or that bridge crossing the Hodgson Brook. This item is identifying a connector. It's a planning element which, if you know, going out Coakley Road, currently you have to go to the Route 1 intersection where there's a traffic signal. The DOT has identified the possibility of eliminating a right-hand turn on Cottage, which would make it difficult for people to access off of Coakley Road to be able to utilize that. So, or coming off of Cottage to be able to turn down. So this item would create a connector over to Borthwick Road, so that would get people to the new signalized intersection at Hodgson Way, or is it Hodgson Way? What is the, yes, sorry. Yeah, the K Street connector is what I think of it as. But so it's a planning element, and it's dependent upon DOT's action over time. The next item is a traffic calming element. We've received a lot of requests from various neighborhoods throughout the city to address traffic calming, and this would address Aldridge South and Middle Road, and we plan on setting aside monies each year to address these things. It's important to note that Woodbury Avenue has also been identified as a request, and that's something that we've been working on. It came to Parking, Traffic, and Safety, and we've been collecting data, and we have a plan of action for that. We're intending to move forward with that with existing authorization come this summer. So that's it has been brought up, and I wanted to make it clear to the council that that has been addressed. Similar to our sidewalks, we have biennial appropriation of or request for monies for the street paving. The next slide shows our backlog of streets and the ability to continue a regular infusion of improvements to the roadways is important to maintaining our network. It's easy to have roads slip in terms of quality, and this program has been very successful, and we would encourage you to continue to fund that. Similar to the roads throughout the city, we're responsible for the Pease International Trade Port Road System, and these monies are identified for upgrades at that area. And the next sheet shows a backlog of some of the needed streets. Junkins Avenue has been identified as in need of improvements. This Complete Streets project would address the culverts that go underneath the roadway for South Mill Pond, as well as the sidewalks and drainage along this corridor. And the next project is a request from Pinehurst Road residents to do drainage improvements at the end of the roadway. And these monies are identified to complete that. And the Madison Street neighborhood has requested installation of curbing along their roadway, and these monies are identified to make improvements to that section of roadway.
Good evening, Brian Getz, Deputy Director of Public Works, here to speak about enterprise funds. Terry Damaris, our city engineer, will speak about the sewer, and I will speak about water. As noted by the city manager and also Peter Rice, these projects in the enterprise fund are funded totally by water and sewer feeds. And also of note is on the water side, we are a regional water system, so our customers are not only in Portsmouth, but the towns of Newington, Greenland, and Newcastle, and portions of Rye. The first project is the ongoing work of replacement of water lines. So when we do project works and roads, we include the replacement of water mains, and every other year we bond $1 million to use for the next 2 years for those projects. The next project is well station improvements. The city has 9 well stations, and over time the infrastructure ages out, so this money's the $1 million is for putting towards the Collins Well, which is currently in the process of getting an upgrade. The next project is an out year. We are currently doing continued study and efforts at the Bellamy Reservoir to improve the water quality. The 2 droughts that we had in 2016 and 2020 really offered insight as to additional efforts that could be taken to improve water quality. The treatment of our surface water actually starts out at the reservoir, with some separation of different zones of water and mixing. So this project monies will go towards that. As previously mentioned, the Collins Well is currently undergoing some upgrades. This is actually a shot of the drill rig on site. And these monies, we expect this year to move forward with the permitting of those upgrades and then final design of them, and then the funding to actually incorporate all the infrastructure necessary to pipe it up will be the monies for FY24. The next project is tank painting. This is the Spinney tank, and it's reaching about a 20-year life, and it's time to paint the exterior, and that's what the monies for this project are for. Additionally, we have a very large tank, 7.5 million gallons, near Lafayette Road in the south side of the system, and we are currently looking to fund a study this year which will look at ongoing long-term needs in the south end of the water system, and the monies towards that will then lead to what the design fixes would be for that tank. And the monies in FY25 are for that, and then anticipated construction monies in the out years. The city has the Madbury Water Treatment Facility, which last year celebrated its 10th anniversary. And the equipment in that is aged out, though it's only 10 years old. It's been running 24/7, so it's anticipated that in a few more years we're going to have to change out, some of the bigger motors and bigger equipment. So the monies in this item are for that.
Good evening, Terry Damaris, City Engineer. Similar to the water system, each year we replace a fair amount of our, or we set aside funds really for annual sewer line replacement. We have about 120 miles of pipeline. Many of those are older and undersized, so we look to replace those as part of some of the bigger capital projects and prior to roadway reconstruction. So this funds the cost for that effort. The next project is related to the Pease Wastewater Treatment Facility. So the city has two wastewater treatment facilities. The Pease Treatment Facility serves the collection system for the entire Pease International Trade Port. That facility was originally constructed in the 50s, got updated in the 90s. There's been a few minor updates since the 90s, but overall, the majority of that facility really has exceeded its useful lifespan and is in need of significant improvement. Coupled with that, we've been looking at the need for a increase in the capacity of that facility. So back in 2019, we put in a request to the Environmental Protection Agency for an increase in the capacity from what it's currently listed at, which is 1.2 million gallons per day, to about 1.77 million gallons per day. That increase in capacity is going to address the build-out of the Pease International Trade Port, as well as a request from Lines of Biologics for an expansion of their facility. So we've been planning for that upgrade, but we are still waiting a draft permit from the Environmental Protection Agency for that capacity increase. We expect that that'll happen in this current calendar year. The overall cost for this effort will really be kind of dependent on future discussions as it relates to what that permit says, and also policy discussions on cost apportionment. So what we've done here is try to allocate the major categories. So what you'll see under the bond category for both fiscal 23 and 24 is kind of the costs associated with designing and constructing the replacement of the aged equipment. And then under the PPP, or private-public partnership category, we've tried to estimate the cost for what would be equivalent to the capacity increase. So, and again, those will be part of a future discussion on how the cost apportionment works. The next item is for a wastewater reuse project at the Pease Wastewater Treatment Facility as well. So this is a green initiative where you do additional treatment on the back end of a treatment facility of the water and redistribute it for things like irrigation and cooling towers. So this is a something that's feasible in an area like the Pease International Trade Port. And what we did is add funds in fiscal 23 to update an older study that looked at this. So that'll be done with the funds in fiscal year 23. Our next item is long-term control plan related projects. So the city has what's called a long-term control plan. It's a requirement from the Environmental Protection Agency because we still have portions of our sewer collection system that take drainage during wet weather events. That's called a combined collection system. As a result of that combined collection system, we have combined sewer overflows at the South Mill Pond and Piscataqua River down by Market Street. So we have to comply with this long-term control plan, which we've been generally doing sewer separation. There's a number of different requirements that fall out of the city's consent decree with the Environmental Protection Agency in 2009 that require us to do an update to this plan, and we set aside funds for that in fiscal 24 to start that process. Next item is wastewater pumping station improvements. The city owns 20 wastewater pumping stations. The lifespan of these stations is about 20 years, so we are continually kind of looking at major rehabilitation or replacement of those stations, and the costs here for fiscal 23 are planning for assisting in the cost for major improvements of the stations. Next item is the Woodbury Avenue sewer separation. This is to conduct sewer separation and remove some catch basins that are connected to the sewer on Woodbury Ave between Farm Lane and Rockingham Avenue. The fiscal year 23 funds would be for design. Fiscal year 24 would be for construction. Next item is the sewer main for the Sagamore Avenue sewer extension. So as I mentioned on one of the previous element sheets, we have a consent decree with the Environmental Protection Agency. That consent decree has a requirement for us to conduct a sewer extension project along both sides of Sagamore Avenue on either side of the creek at the bridge. So that'll serve about 80 properties. This project was previously funded in fiscal 18, I believe, with a $4.4 million bond. And after we got through design, put this out to bid, the funds that we have were not enough to cover the cost of the project. So what we did is we repackaged that project. We split the scope essentially in half so that we could at least get it moving, try and comply with the consent decree deadlines with the available funds we had. The additional costs here shown in fiscal 23 are for the additional funds needed to cover our requirements under the consent decree for the sewer extension. And this item covers just the sewer mains in the roadway. The next item is the same project, but is looking at the costs associated with the services beyond the roadway to the homes and converting the existing septic systems to pumping to small pump chambers that redirect into the new mains that would get constructed under that previous element sheet. So there was a cost proposal that the staff put together that will go back in front of the city council for discussion now that we have bids. So as I mentioned, we did have to rebid that project, and sometime in the near future, as we get are able to evaluate the bids that we recently received, we'll have to come back to the council and have a discussion about the cost apportionment associated with this particular item. But we've been planning for funds set aside to help make these connections. That's what this element sheet is for. Next item is the Mechanic Street pumping station upgrade. You'll see that there's no funds associated with this. Last year, we put in a $2 million project that was funded for a fix of this pump station to try and extend its lifespan about 10 years. We've done a lot of work down in that area with the Pierce Island and the work around the seawall. So the goal was really to extend its lifespan, but this will be a major project that comes up in the next 10 years, so we elected to leave it here for informational purposes.
A couple of years ago, we started doing what's called combined projects. They show multiple funding sources, and so the next series of projects will be discussed by Terry, Brian, and myself. This first one is Bartlett Street, which is from Dennett Street down to just before Ritchie Lumber, or till Ritchie Lumber. And it includes upgrades to the sewer, the roadway, and the water. And so these monies are identified to implement the design, which is currently ongoing. And some of you may have participated in some design discussions, so that's continuing to move forward.
Next item is the Fleet Street Utilities Upgrade and Streetscape. So I mentioned earlier the long-term control plan, which brings on sewer separation projects. This is one of those projects that's required, that the city is required to conduct through the Environmental Protection Agency. It would include full roadway reconstruction, replacement of all the utilities, and then some additional streetscape work. Many of you may have seen the signs that have been up recently for us requesting information about interest on the street level work. There's a lot of utility work that needs to be done underneath. In addition, as we've been evaluating this particular project, we identified a need to provide a new drainage outlet that would go down Maplewood Avenue out towards the North Mill Pond. So what we've shown in the cost for this is that in fiscal 23 we added funds to conduct the construction, design and construction of that outfall first, and then in fiscal 24 would be the cost for the roadway work, which would be Fleet Street and the adjacent roadways that would be touched as part of that work. The next item is Edmund Avenue. So this is for full roadway reconstruction and utility work along Edmund Avenue between from Maplewood Avenue over to Woodbury. And this includes replacement of the water main. There's a low pressure sewer main that needs to be replaced, and general roadway improvements.
As mentioned, for the water and sewer, there are quite a bit of mileage of pipes in the ground for water and sewer. That is the same case with our storm drains and storm pipes. So this element, for the next page, please, covers the cost of some of those replacements ongoing. And a few years ago, we developed a separate stormwater fund and split the costs. So these funds currently are being shared 50-50 by the general fund and the sewer due to the combined sewer system and stormwater. So as you can see, we have programmed about $300,000 for this year, and then subsequently additional monies in the out years.
In the 2015 time period, the city constructed a project along Chapel Street. The project was bid, and we had enough money to cover Chapel Street from Daniel to State. We had also bid at that time and designed the section from Daniel up to Bow, but didn't have enough funds to cover it, so we're planning this in as a long-term project or an out-year project for fiscal 26, just so we can get that work completed.
This project identifies or addresses space needs at the Department of Public Works facility. Currently, water and sewer equipment are being stored in leased spaces off-site. These monies would go to expand the high bay area for that equipment that's critical to keep warm during the winter months so that they can operate when necessary. And this final item, I believe it's final item, is monies identified in out year for upgrades to the Creek neighborhood. And this is intended to be similar to how the McDonough Street neighborhood was upgraded in a phased approach where sections were done. And so the intent is to identify monies every few years to address the streetscape and roadways and as well as water and sewer in that area. So that is, I believe, the last slide.
Thank you, everyone. So for questions, open it up to the council. What I'd ask, if a council member has a question, to ask that question, we'll go to that project. And if another counselor has a question of that project, we'll go to that project. We'll stay on that project, and then I'll call on another counselor to ask another question. And we'll go to another project based on that. Does that make sense for everyone? All right, anyone have any questions on this? Counselor Tabor. And raise your hands, I'll mark you down.
Thanks, Mayor. I thought we could spend some time on the police station. Chief Newport, if you could give us the timeline that you're looking at this point, and when you see site selection happening, and then we can talk a little about the cost.
So as far as the timeline goes, we're working with Peter Rice and DPW as far as picking the location. That would probably be the biggest next step. Until we have a location, the rest of the timeline won't, we won't know what that is. But at this point right now, we have a few sites that we've selected and are doing test and analysis on those and waiting on the results of that.
Okay. And are we still using the study of 2015? I think that shows a maximum build out of 66,000 square feet.
Yes.
Okay. So looking at the $40 million approximately, we're in the neighborhood of $606 a square foot. And I wondered if you see that. I know these are placeholder numbers. I know that we're trying to work off of what our consultants have told us, but both for the chief and for Peter, do we see ways we can sort of value engineer that over time?
If you'd like, absolutely. But first and foremost, it comes down to function for the police. So that's what would drive the value engineering discussions. But I believe there's opportunities to look at some of the space allocations and to sharpen our pencil. And obviously, it really comes down to what their needs are in order to function. So I wouldn't want to speculate at this point without going through the process. And once you have a designer on board, that would be the opportunity to start refining and looking at saying how can we improve, how can we get some synergies relative to combining efforts, and maybe there's opportunities as part of that design that we would discover. But we would rely on the design staff or the architect or engineers that we're working with to assist us in that effort.
Okay. Just for reference, I think Dover Station was a smaller station built 6 years ago. Maybe not as comparable, but they were in the neighborhood of $310 a square foot. So anything we can do to get what the department needs out of a way that taxpayers can have the least burden would be great.
Thank you, Councilor Tabor. I had the Assistant Mayor, then Councilor Blaylock and Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. I just wanted to touch base when we were talking about the need for the new athletic fields. In that number, in the CIP, we had touched on artificial turf in that field.
Pardon me, just, are there any questions on the police station left from the council? All right, we'll come back to that question. Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. Chief Newport, I see this 400,000 right now to repair the old station. Is it fair to assume that is because of the mold, or is that just regular maintenance to a building?
The majority, we asked for 400,000 probably 2 years ago to do some upgrades in the police station unrelated to the mold renovation. In the last 2 years, the 400,000 that we received for FY21 and 22, the majority of it has had to go towards the mold remediation and asbestos. So the monies we're asking in FY '23 to get back to the original station upgrades we were trying to make, which is upgrading some of our locker rooms. We have some IT rooms that need to be upgraded, and just to make some general renovations inside of the police department.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand if the majority of this 400K a year was due to because of the mold, you know what I mean? Because we're just kind of throwing 400K at a constant problem that obviously won't.
Our FY '23 money is not geared towards the mold renovation.
Yeah.
All right, I had Counselor Bagley and then Counselor Moreau.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just a quick question, Chief Newport. I noticed there's a lot of dispatch and hardware-related components also in the budget. Will all those components theoretically be transferable to a new station? Has that been looked at or considered at all?
Yeah, all the IT infrastructure is infrastructure that could be moved when we move into, if at that time when we look to move into a new location.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and I'll allow that question because it was tied it back right at the end to the police station, but right on the specific project. Counselor Moreau.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question really relates to, it doesn't sound like we'll be breaking ground very soon if we haven't even picked a location. So is it feasible to say that all of this money needs to be spent in this fiscal year, or could it be broken out into 2 fiscal years?
Most likely what would happen is the authorization for the monies would occur, and, you know, I would have defer to the finance department, but we would think there would be bond anticipation notes done, and that the total amount would not be bonded all at once. However, to be able to move forward with the project, you need to be able to commit to the construction, and that total construction amount is that, you know, we're projecting $42 million total with soft costs. So it would be something that, in terms of the authorization process, would be necessary.
Thank you.
All right, was there another question?
I had heard of plans at one point of using other areas of this facility for the police department. Is that true, or is
In the past, there were discussions of that, but we feel they were not feasible, and I'll let Peter can speak on this, because at one point, you know, he thought that would be feasible, but as we've learned through our mediation project, that it's complicated, and the amount of space that we need. This building that we're in now was a hospital. We were kind of shoehorned into it. It's not designed for a police facility in today's day and age, with ADA compliances, and also with our CJIS requirements, which is the FBI security rules that are in effect.
Thank you.
Thank Chief Newport on this. Obviously, a huge amount of money, huge undertaking. We'll be following this as closely as we can. 2 points, just on the timing, as community campus comes online, that might start shifting things, not suggesting that would be a site location, but opening up opportunities, and I would hope that we would have a multiple site options, so that we're not kind of going down a path of, you know, selecting a site only to have a tougher negotiation to acquire that site. So if they're, you know, I'm sure that's a part of that, but multiple site locations would be preferable from a negotiation standpoint of land acquisition.
Well, we've had, like I said, we have several locations that we're looking at. We started with a lot more. We've kind of whittled it down, but before locking into one specific site, I think we'd ask for some public input.
Great.
Mayor, Councilor Cook.
Oh, Councilor Cook.
And a housekeeping issue from the production booth. If everyone can speak very clearly and close to their microphone, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, do we know what the time frame would be from purchasing property to the build-out? I.e., how long would it take do we estimate to build a new facility? And therefore, how long would you remain in the existing facility?
So if we had a site selected today and we decided to start building tomorrow, I think it would be approximately 2 years before, 2 to 3 years before we actually move into the building. Peter, you can.
That's optimistic, yes. It takes a long time to design and then build, so, it would be, if you said today we had an engineer selected and start the design process, it would easily be a 1.5 year design, and then, probably 2 years construction. So.
Can I ask a follow-on? Do we know if there are any plans for the existing facility? If we do move forward and building a new facility?
Do you mean the reuse of where they're at now?
Yes, exactly.
There's a lot of desires for space in this building. So, I would defer to the city manager in this discussion. I think there's a lot of aspects of the police station and the programming that would warrant further discussion, and it deserves a more detailed discussion than what we're really able to do tonight. I defer to the city manager, though.
Yeah, I'll take that. Let's schedule a work session to discuss the police station. Anytime we're talking about $40 million, we could spend all night talking about it. But let's move on from this right now. Not to let you off the hook, Chief Newport, but we'll come back to this at a later date. I'm sure the public will have some questions on that. We should listen to them specifically on that, and we'll move on to other items. So, Assistant Mayor Kelly, you're up next.
Sorry for that interruption of the rules. Going back to the school department, in the CIP we have $800,000 moving allocation to an artificial turf field. Have we looked at the cost of potentially a natural field for that, for the artificial turf replacement?
Mrs. Mayor, honestly, I guess I can't answer that in the affirmative. I know that the facilities department, our facilities chief, would suggest that the measurements, the repairs, and all of the realities that he's facing suggest that it's a safe field, but we're certainly moving towards a need to replace the surface, the carpet, turning that back into a natural field. I don't have even a guess at what the cost would be or what the infrastructure adjustments would have to be. So, but I certainly could ask, and we can explore that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions on that? Just a quick comment on that. We'll likely touch on this as we're going through the conversations with the existing rec fields. This will kind of be brought into that. Disposal of the field is something that we're all going to be very concerned about, and making sure that we're taking the appropriate steps. I know the previous council was concerned about that in installing this field, so I think this will come up before the council, but let's try to relate it back to the conversations that are ongoing with the new field out by community campus. So, next question. Councilor Blaylock.
And I guess on that same, you mentioned the tennis courts. With those tennis courts, I believe I heard they would be full size so that the high school could host an actual tournament and be the host.
The plan right now, yes, Councilor, is to replace the 4 courts that were built in '89 that are there at the site. Those will, the plan right now allows for 6 to be built in its place, adjusted just slightly, and so then the varsity team will be able to compete fully right there on the high school grounds.
Awesome. Thank you.
If I can add to that, we'll take the opportunity to reorient the courts. As tennis aficionados know, they're not oriented correctly to the sun, and I believe we can get more in if we reorient them the way they're currently situated on the pad.
Thank you. All right, any other questions? Councilor Tabor.
This is not relevant to tennis courts.
Well, if there's no other, we'll move on to another topic.
It's relevant to streets. Peter, I know that we cut our capital spending during COVID, and I just wanted to know, did we, that list of, that backlog of streets, did that backlog of streets to repave grow during that time? Because I noticed we're pausing again this year on street repaving money. I'm just concerned, does that give us the COVID backlog plus more backlog?
So what we look at is biennial appropriation. So we still have half the money that was appropriated in 20 to complete this year's project. So these monies would be identified for the next 2 years out. So we instead of coming to you every year asking for $2 million, we ask for $4 million, and then it covers the 2 years worth of work. So we were able to complete quite a bit of work over the last 2 years and continue to be able to accomplish that. So the answer is the backlog didn't increase. And in fact, our pavement condition index, which is a measurement of the condition of the roads, actually went from a 76 to a 78. So we saw some improvements from that. And that can go up and down depending upon, specific projects we get done. But we were able to get quite a bit done this last year, so that was beneficial. I mean, we do have a couple of very large projects. Middle Street is probably the one that jumps to mind. It's probably it's going to be a very expensive street to do. It's wide, it's long, and there's, a lot associated with it. But there's a number of streets that are in need. But overall, we've been able to keep up. So we didn't see a significant reduction.
That's great, and it's great that we have the regular measurement of the condition of the streets in the street index, and we know where our critical areas are.
Yeah, it gives us a good forewarning if we're starting to slide.
Councilor Bagley. And again, these questions they don't have to be specific projects. Councilor Tabor had a broader question. If there's broader questions, feel free to ask those too. Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I've got a couple pretty simple questions, but I'm going to piggyback off of what Councilor Tabor said. In the past, it was discussed that there was some concern with Middle Street. If we let it go too much longer, it could end up being a much more expensive rehabilitation. And there was also some discussion, there's a lot of discussion about Middle Street, and there was some talk of maybe doing some sort of task force to have some citizen input on making it into a bit more of a boulevard. Is it still feasible, or is the timeline too compressed for going down that road?
What's holding us up on moving forward with paving on Middle Street is the Union Street Sewer Project, which is going to come out onto Middle Street for a section. So in Terry, it goes to Miller. So it's a significant deep section of sewer line. So we're going to be completing that work, and then we'll be able to, which is the next year and a half, 2 years out.
Yes, we're in the early phases of design of that, so that'll last about a year, and then construction will start soon after.
So we have a couple years to start the process of discussing, potential modifications to the roadway. As you may recall, the prior city council requested that we do an evaluation of the bike lane as it was originally designed and as it's been adjusted. We're working with a consulting engineer now to complete that review, and hopefully in the next month or so we'll have a public meeting. We're going to be soliciting input from the residents along that corridor, as well as residents throughout the city. So by springtime, we anticipate getting back before the Department of Transportation, the City Council, and finalizing at least the existing conditions to know for certain if we're going to be able to keep the monies that were spent to do that work. So that does not preclude visiting or revisiting the road design as we move forward. So we have time.
Great, thank you. I have a series of relatively sidewalk-related questions. Should I go now or hold them?
Sure, and then Counselor Denton, I think your hand is up. Is that, my eyes are getting bad. Hand is up. Okay, so Counselor Bagley, and then we'll go to Counselor Denton.
So Peter, Mr. Rice, a few more questions for you. On Madison Street, I understand there's, if I recall correctly, only sidewalks on one side of the street?
Correct.
Would that be putting sidewalks on the other side of the street as well, or just curbing?
It wasn't anticipated to be putting sidewalks. What was requested was to create parking spaces, so it would be bump outs with parking spaces and a curb line to keep people from getting into the grass.
Okay.
So that was the intent, not a sidewalk.
All right, understood. And then we did get an email from a gentleman in Maple Haven, and also talked about, I'm sorry, it might have been Panaway Manor. And you mentioned that I think in February, there's already been some surveys out. There's going to be some public talk. So those sidewalks are a priority on the list. It sounds like those two areas are next on the list to
Yes.
be rehabilitated.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Denton.
Thank you, Your Honor. This question is not related to sidewalks. It's actually for you or the city manager. As far as process goes, if we're interested as a council in introducing or reintroducing CIP items, what's the best approach? Would it be to introduce it as an agenda item or wait until the CIP meeting, which I'd probably advise against?
So it's a good process question. I don't see Bob in here anywhere. Anybody else? Valerie, any idea what's the best process?
I think, and I'll look to the staff who've been here longer than I have to help me with this, but I think it's best to submit it as soon as possible, and we'll evaluate what it is against the list that is on the approved list. I don't know how that treats the approved and certified list of projects by the planning board. I don't know if this needs to go back to the planning board for their review and ratification. Peter says no. I think we just have to acknowledge it as a change in the CIP, and any addition to the CIP will have some sort of correlating effect so as to stay within policy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Denton. Assistant Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor.
Counselor Blair?
Mr. Rice, just to touch on, kind of to piggyback what Councilor Bagley had said, the Maple Haven project, there was a little bit of a concern in the neighborhood, and I spoke to some residents, and we did receive an email from a resident there, that the Maple Haven, the survey that was sent out, did not have the same options as the similar surveys that were sent out in Ward 2 for a sidewalk replacement. There was no option for asphalt or for brick or for concrete. So I think there's a little hesitation or worry in that neighborhood of, are we actually getting replaced sidewalks? And if so, what does that look like?
So the policy on sidewalks, which is a council accepted policy, is brick sidewalks in the downtown and historic districts. All other areas are concrete sidewalks. If it is a multi-use path, it can be an asphalt sidewalk. The questions, the last time Maple Haven was looked at for sidewalks, the feedback we received from residents at the time was they were interested in eliminating the sidewalks. So the reason we wanted to define or get a consensus from the residents out there is we didn't want to start investing a bunch of money in there if the majority of people are like, we don't want sidewalks. We have low volume traffic. We're perfectly fine walking the street. Give us more front lawn. We're happier with that. So we wanted to get a feel for that. The question relative to materials is not something that's up for discussion. There are residents that have asked for if they have a brick driveway, they don't want to have asphalt going through that. Well, our policy in the past has been to say that the resident can pay for that brick sidewalk. We advise them against it because we don't believe it's a good material for a tip down of a driveway because it heaves a lot and it's easily damaged by plows. But it's a resident's choice, but we make it clear that it's at their expense and it's at their risk. So there are opportunities.
Thank you.
Councilor Blaylock?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, Mr. Rice, You said you've already started the process of the study of those sidewalks in Panaway Manor and in Maple Haven. When would be an estimated time of completion for those sidewalks?
I don't have an estimated time of completion.
You don't know.
The intent is to be ready to include it as, at least portions of it as part of this coming year's bid cycle. Panaway Manor in particular is a lot of sidewalk. It's a big area and it's going to be pretty expensive to do that much sidewalk. Maple Haven is not as large, but is still significant. So the intent is to get the design, get the consensus that everybody wants, yes, we want sidewalks, and how we're going to go about doing that. And then we will include it in our bid process, and the intent is to get started. We don't know if we'll be able to get, how much we'll be able to get done until we get prices, because we have previous authorizations and money's available, but depending upon the bids, we could do more or less.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Bagley.
Sorry to pick on you, Mr. Rice. The Fleet Street upgrade, if we end up burying the utilities, I've heard from some people that we don't have enough power downtown. For instance, the DC fast chargers. It seems like the grid is a little bit stretched thin. Is there any upgrades that could be done or would be done if we were to bury the power lines, or is that not accounted for?
That would be part of, the requirements that we have with Eversource. We've been working closely with Eversource to try to address these challenges. And, obviously we want to make sure whatever we do is flexible and addresses future needs. As you probably know, high-speed chargers are a very significant draw on the system. And we know that there's a desire to have the Type 3 chargers, which are, about 125 amps of draw per head, which is significant for a system. So we would work with Eversource to determine what areas of the system can handle that draw, and what areas can't. I know of 2 blocks in particular in town which currently are struggling to provide adequate power. So we are working with Eversource to address these issues, and hopefully we'll see some resolution in the near future.
Thank you.
Councilor Moreau.
On that same project, could I ask when construction will actually be happening? Mostly just because we do have a 400th birthday coming, and I know that there are some people that would really like to know that downtown may not be torn up during that year.
Yes, as Terry was mentioning, the project's broken into 2 parts. Because we need to have an outfall for the separated stormwater, that is anticipated to be done first. And Terry, you could probably speak to the schedule better than I.
Yeah, so one of the benefits of having that, and one of the reasons that we put it as kind of a phase 1, is to avoid the 400th anniversary. So that'll assist in shifting that along, but the outfall will be a necessary first phase of the work.
So it's important to note, though, that doesn't mean no construction is going to occur. That outfall is going to be construction, and it'll be serious construction, but it just won't be down Fleet Street.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up on that with the, I guess, improvements to Market Square, and then that was the following year. That would be completed by the 400th or thereabouts?
We would not anticipate being able to do that. So the intent would be we would get consensus in terms of what upgrades would be needed, and then it would be done in conjunction probably a year after the 400th, which is, 2023 is coming up quickly.
You're right.
So we don't want to bite off too much or promise that we can get a project started and completed within that time frame.
And then just quickly, you said that the Daniel Street is in conjunction with the improvements to Market Square. Did I mishear that earlier? The bearing of the power lines on Daniel Street.
The bearing the power lines, well, there's two things in terms of the power lines. The money's identified on this one would be the Fleet Street project,
Okay.
which would be Hanover over to State Street. So, given to State Street. Given the schedule, that would be, after the 400th.
Okay.
The Daniel Street work is really, so it's actually Penn Hollow down to Bow Street to Market Street, but there is a little section on Daniel Street.
And that's after the 400th, or that's commencing earlier?
That would be in conjunction with the McIntyre, whatever gets done in the McIntyre.
Okay, so that's tied to the McIntyre.
That's tied to the McIntyre.
Okay, so that doesn't start, that work that's outside or that's going Penn Hollow down to Bow, part of Daniel Street, up to Moe's Sub Shop, I'm guessing, that doesn't start till the McIntyre gets sorted out.
Yeah, there'll be we're getting into the weeds in terms of some of the projects, but there is a short section on from Penn Hollow to Market Square this spring. That's work we're taking advantage of because a developer is going to be spending some money. We extracted improvements along that section so that we won't have to go back into that. So that's going to get done this spring. The section from Penn Hollow, Daniel Street, Penn Hollow down would have to be in conjunction with the McIntyre, and I believe we show that as an out year in 26.
Okay, the former point was what I was trying to uncover. So thanks. That's.
Yep. Mr. Mayor, if I might, before we move off the Market Square revisioning, for those of you who may not know, in the fall of 19, the planning department solicited bids for that work. We had several good proposals, and right before COVID hit, we were prepared to move forward. When COVID hit, we decided to put the brakes on that, and so it's fair to say that the timing, in a perfect world, may have been achieved before the 400th, and in a perfect world, that would have been great. But it's fair to say it was a casualty of COVID, and that's why it's here in the CIP and how you see it inching up.
Councilor Cook, do you have a question?
Not about this subject.
Okay, we're all done. I abused my rules and I asked a bunch of questions. So, Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for planning. On the climate action plan funding, the funding seems very limited to me, $50,000. I want to know what the scope of this work is beyond this is general description. I know that there's some concern about not just addressing reductions in emissions, but also mitigation plans for things like sea level rise.
Yeah, so that it hasn't been fleshed out completely. It was really put in there as a starting point. I can tell you that the Sustainability Committee is very interested in making it more of a community plan so that it's not just addressing municipal operations, but it addresses the community as a whole. So trying to make reductions that are beyond just what the city government operations is, but the trying to encourage changes by people in the community and those kind of things. Along with that, the community, there will be a fair amount of community effort anticipated, but you're right, more money could take it further, for sure.
Can I follow up? Do we anticipate a revision then to like fiscal year 24, 25 based upon decisions in fiscal year 23 around this subject?
I think it's likely that there'll be, things identified for the next capital plan from that work. This is a starting point and really will inform the future of where we need to go next.
Thank you.
I also should say that it's also an opportunity to leverage grant funds if there's opportunities for that. So it could be more money based on that.
Great. Thank you.
Councilor Cook? Any other questions? Councilor Bagley?
All right, so getting into the weeds a little bit, some of the most requested items from the public are the blinking crossing flashers, which I think are like $15,000, and the speed limit signs that get mounted to poles. Is there adequate funding in the CIP to meet those over the next year or so, in your opinion?
So we've identified $300,000 for traffic calming, and both of those items would fall into that category. So I would say, I would think yes. We also carry some operational money in our parking budget for some of these efforts. It's the challenge with the types of treatments that are being identified. you need to be judicious about where you use them. If you use them too many, they become background noise and people don't pay attention to them. So they need to be warranted, meaning the volume of pedestrian traffic or whether the speeds in the area. And it's something that the Parking, Traffic, and Safety Committee has been reviewing. We're currently looking at doing a citywide street speed evaluation to look at the types of streets and the speeds that are the signage and the speed limits posted to see how we can better align use with speeds. So I'm comfortable with the resources we have. I know many people will request these items. So obviously, if you want everybody to have, whoever asks for this, I don't believe it's enough money.
I think I would like to add that the standards that govern the appropriateness of these types of devices are through MUTCD. They're not developed, subjectively by the city. We follow. Does this fall under MUTCD?
There's that. There's other guidelines as well as engineering judgment. But it's something that I'm comfortable with the monies that are identified now, given the time it takes for us to do the evaluations, given the time it takes to upgrade it. And there are other projects as well when we do upgrade, such as Islington Corridor. Those get rolled into those projects. They're not separate monies that we identify. So I would say, I'm comfortable with the number we have right now.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Lombardi.
Thank you. I would like to put into the mix here that the implementation of a speed hump on Aldrich Road was extremely effective in controlling speeds. Now, I know the city manager doesn't like to bring her motor scooter over that, but I think that those are an effective speed control device on residential roads. So I would encourage the use of them.
Thank you, Councilor Lombardi. Councilor Moreau?
Am I allowed to move on to a different topic?
I think so. I think that is kind of falling apart. And we'll just,
Okay.
if you have a question, we'll just raise our hand and we'll do it.
I'm not really entirely sure who to ask this question of, but I'm just going to state it out. Based off of what has been now approved for the new skate park at the stump dump, how does that then change the CIP, and when will we see those changes in the CIP document?
So Todd and Peter, I believe it was Todd Henley who touched upon this, but as you will recall, this, and Councilor Moreau, you served on the CIP Advisory Committee as a planning board member at the time. It was the recommendation of staff to place the element sheet in the manner that we did with the amount for several reasons. One of which was the feedback we got from the consultant was no matter how much money you put toward this, there's only so fast. This has a cadence that we cannot influence. And as such, we put $200,000 into design for FY23, thinking that was reasonable, and to bond for it in the out year. So we are going to continue at the pace to build the skate park with those elements, the 4 elements that Todd mentioned: pump track. Don't hold me to the 3rd one or the 4th one, maybe gravel parking lot. But we can only spend the money as fast as the consultants can help us with the work. So I don't know if I'm accurately answering your question.
I'm just wondering if it's going to change the CIP because of money that's already been set aside for it. Will it move where that money looks in the CIP?
So process-wise, if we were to not spend unassigned fund balance as appropriated for this project, it would close to fund balance. If we chose to encumber that money in a future year, we could. If we chose to finance it differently, that would be a policy decision by the council. So it does not go away. It would return, if so to speak.
Thank you.
All right, Councilor Cook.
So I have a non-CIP project question around debt service. It's also included in our council document. So that can wait. if we want.
There's going to be a budgetary conversation. I'm happy to have you ask the question, and we'll see.
It's around capital projects.
Great.
So the debt service model for our capital projects gets us to a little over 10% by fiscal year 28. So I have a question around where, I guess this is for finance. Is there room to now refinance any of our existing debt, given the current low interest rates and our good bond position, in order to reduce some of the obligation over time? And secondly, how are anticipated changes in interest rates going to impact those debt projections?
Hi, thank you. I'm Judy Belanger, Finance Director. A couple of things with refinancing debt. So the only opportunity we have to refinance debt is when a 20-year bond issue becomes 10 years old. There's also a time frame of when that can occur. So it would have to close within 90 days of when the next interest and principal payment is due, so that they can recall to the investors to give them plenty of notice of saying, we're calling your bonds back. So we do have another opportunity coming up, but it really is going to be like one bond issue. Before we go forward with that, there's an analysis that's done by Hilltop Securities to see if it makes sense to do so. Right now, the interest rates are still fairly low in the bond market for us, especially being a AAA bond-rated community. They are creeping up, and again, it's like a crystal ball. So we do some comparisons, and we get information from Hilltop Securities on their recent bonds with other communities. So when we project, we do consult with them about what kind of interest rates that we should use in our performers. But, until you actually go out for market, and it can change on any given day.
Thank you. So I should assume those are built in to this projection modeling, those anticipated interest rates or whatever?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Cook? Anything else? Councillor Bagley?
All right, this is my final question. For Mr. Rice, the stump dump is now being used as a staging area, and hopefully very soon will become a skate park. Are there costs associated with now having to stage elsewhere, or will that have any sort of appreciable impact on some of these upcoming projects?
Typically, what we do is we put it upon the contractor to find staging. So there is a cost associated with staging, and it's been very convenient to be able to provide that staging because it does have material impact the price of the project. We also have extracted improvements to the site as part of the ability to stay there. There is a difficulty doing projects in town. It is nice to have a space that you can do laydown, but that's what contractors do. They figure out how to get places to do their work, and it doesn't make sense to tie up a real great asset for the city in that manner and not utilize it for recreational needs. So, I mean, it will have a material cost, but it's you look at the benefits associated with having that space for activities. It's worth it.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Councillor Tabor.
A question. Thank you, Mayor. Question for Todd Henley, I think. Am I correct that in the capital improvement plan last year we had a indoor recreation study, and I didn't see that in the CIP this year?
Correct. We are currently having an updated recreation needs study happening currently.
Right.
That's what you're referring to.
Yeah. I just, I just don't want us to lose the opportunity to think big for the long term. We've got Spinnaker Point, which is a lease facility, fairly small, but has a very loyal following, particularly among seniors. We've got a pool that's aging, and, you know, I think the thinking at the time was, could all these pieces be put in a hat and come out in with a new state-of-the-art facility that has everything we want for indoor recreation, pool, pickleball, maybe even a hockey rink. There was talk of that. So I wonder if those ideas are still percolating.
They are, and that's part of what we're doing with the recreation needs study. That just started somewhat recently. So all of those items that you just said are going to be analyzed and looked at, and a report back to the council will happen once that's completed later on in the year.
Great, thank you.
All right. Well, no more questions. I had a couple. I thought everybody did a great job. You asked most of my questions on there. These are going to seem so ticky-tack. But Alan, in the IT department, big number spread across. I think the service going down. I think or at least I recognize the importance of making sure that's invested in. Is it possible in the future to get, we see the same number going across? I work in software, so I know that those are recurring software fees that, you buy a license and they continue on. Is it possible to break those out versus the implementation costs? And further from that, maybe the software versus the ongoing support model? It's not something that needs to be in this CIP, but ongoing as software becomes a bigger part. Can we understand the differences between the implementation costs and the software costs?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. That's not a problem, so we can take care of that.
Awesome. I had one question for Peter on the Bartlett Creek neighborhood, and I appreciate in this updated CIP, we're no longer referred to as the Islington Creek. We are the one true creek.
I was still nervous when I said it. I was like, is this really the correct?
I made him fix that.
But just on that, I see that Bartlett is coming up, and paid attention to some of those conversations. That's great. Is part of that phased out? I saw that the drains the stormwater drains are part of an out year. I think it's 25. Would there be any work done in 23 as a part of the Bartlett Street on the maybe going up to Woodbury or going down to Whipple on that as a part of that, or would that all be a separate project? And is that cost driven or inconvenience driven?
It's a good question. I'd have to talk to our staff to see why those were not included. Woodbury, you're talking about the dog leg that comes down to Bartlett for the Woodbury section.
Yep.
I believe that from an infrastructure standpoint is in good shape.
Okay.
Morning Street obviously is in need of some work. And the other one you said was Whipple?
No, and then, separate from that, at the Thornton and Bartlett intersection, there's where there's going to be in out years stormwater work done on that. Is that being separated from the Bartlett work that's being done and the what's happening in the creek down Thornton Street? Is that separated out from a cost standpoint or a convenience standpoint for the neighborhood?
And I apologize for not being 100% clear. The work that we're anticipating on Bartlett would go from Dennett to all the way down to Ritchie Lumbers.
That's correct.
Any of the side work, with the exception, would go up Thornton to Woodbury, will get taken care of.
Okay.
And Morning will get taken care of. Anything beyond that, on either side would be part of a phased approach. And it was really more just a project management. The scope gets bigger and bigger, and then it becomes
you start doing the whole
huge
city.
project.
Okay. Yeah.
And it looked at how much can we accomplish as part of one project. What's a logical spot, and that was the kind of the logical delineation for us.
Okay, that's very helpful. And then Maplewood is removed. I recall that from a council meeting. The Maplewood Bridge replacement is it was removed from this CIP, and that's because you guys found that it can stay a little later in terms of federal or red-listed bridges. Is that correct?
So as you may recall, we funded some monies for the Maplewood Bridge project to do an interim project. We're currently in design on that interim project. It's going to reinforce the culvert section, replace the sidewalks and guardrail. And that's to get us in line with state funding. The state said that they don't anticipate bridge funding to be available for 10, 15 years. And the reason we want to wait for that is it's an 80-20 split, including the costs associated with water and sewer. So it's a $10 million project if we included everything, but we're looking at $1.5 million, probably $1.6 million to do this 10-year fix. And if monies became available, and I've talked to, because there's ARPA funds and things like that out there, I've been, trying to determine if there's any way to accelerate, and maybe the state will be funding more bridge projects. But from what I'm hearing is they're already using all that ARPA fund for all the projects that they've been desperately trying to get done, and the schedule hasn't really changed. But we, obviously we'll look at that. But right now, the reason it's not shown as additional funding is because we don't anticipate it probably for 10 years out.
Okay. And then the last question would be on the trestle going under as Bartlett goes to Islington. That's been removed for a couple of years now. Is there any anticipation that would ever be placed back on the CIP, given that's kind of the choke point there for traffic?
The challenge on that one is that's a railroad bridge, a railroad trestle, and it would be the city taking on an expense that really is a railroad expense, and it's something that we've talked about, but it quickly becomes a very expensive project for the benefit of the railroad, and so obviously if the city council felt it was a priority to put that into the mix, we would pursue it, but based on our review and based on discussions with the railroad, we haven't been able to come to agreement on how that would be executed. So we weren't comfortable continuing to show it because it really wasn't something that we as a city were going to complete.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Let's stir up any other questions from the council.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just give a brief update on where we are with ARPA. Assistant City Attorney Jane Farini is doing her best due diligence plowing through the 400-page final rule document that was recently issued. So once we have a good handle on that, we plan to ask for a work session with the council and talk about our ARPA opportunities. Thank you.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody. Again, we're going to get to public comment, but just great job at coming prepared. Great presentation. I know this is the culmination of a lot of work that you guys have done and put into this. It's a lot of work that we're going to take on as a city council in the city, but really appreciate everything that went in. And to the council, if there are questions, reach out to the city manager, and she's going to direct those to the relevant department heads to make sure that we get answers before we adopt anything in the future. So with that, we'll open up to public comment. Please approach the lectern and let's have it. And just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Walter Hamilton, 47 Mary Drive, Maple Haven. This concerns the survey the city has Maple Haven and Panaway Manor residents to complete regarding possible sidewalk reconstruction. Yes. Nice questions like, what's the shape of the sidewalks? Do you use the street instead of the sidewalk? But then at the end it says, you think the sidewalks in your neighborhood should be removed completely, followed by, would removing the sidewalks increase your use of the streets in your neighborhood for walking recreation? Nowhere in this survey does it say, would replacing the sidewalks increase your use of the sidewalks and get you off the street? Nowhere does it say, if we replace the sidewalks, would you use them? So it just, the other thing is, I think Mr. Wright said they completed the survey, and yet the survey, the paper that asked us to do the survey said they have until the end of the month. So I hope he hasn't completed them. That's my comments.
Thank you, Walter. Anyone else from the public?
So far, Mayor, no hands on Zoom. as
Oh,
I
that's right. I
understand it.
forgot about Zoom. Nothing on Zoom. Oh, there is one.
Okay.
Could we promote them to hear the question? And please remember, just name your name and your address.
Yes, hello, counselors. I am Benjamin Doyle. I'm a junior at Portsmouth High School, and I'm just here to, and as a member of the Blue Ribbon Committee on Sustainability and a participant in Eco Club at PHS, I just wanted to state my support for the implementation of the Climate Action Plan. I'm very happy to see it in the capital improvement document. And we have a really unique opportunity here in designing an effective solution that will cater to the specific needs of Portsmouth. So as an eco-municipality, this is just a great example of us upholding our commitments to sound environmental practice. To me, it's a no-brainer. And I think the progress we're making and the support for it is really encouraging. So I thank you, and I just wanted to state my support again.
That is the most articulate high school student I've ever heard.
Yeah, makes me.
Holy cow.
Thank you. It definitely makes me feel. I
Didn't sound like that.
could have repeated high school. Okay, if there are no other questions, I want to thank everyone again for coming out, the effort that went into this, the preparation from all involved. This is a living document. Please reach out to the council with questions from the public, and in turn, we will reach out to the city manager, to department heads to get answers. Ultimately, this is the future that we are making for Portsmouth. This document and what goes in it, shapes the next 5 years and beyond. So thanks for all the effort that went into this. And with that, I will adjourn.
Thank you.